Hey everyone, welcome to the 140th episode of Tuesday Funk, Chicago's favorite eclectic monthly reading series where good writing and good beer mix. My name is Andrew Huff, and this is my co-host, Eden Robbins.
Thanks, Andrew. You can usually find us at the Upstairs Bar at Hopleaf the first Tuesday of every month, but thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are, of course, not there. We've missed you all very much, and so we're trying something a little different and doing this YouTube live video stream. The readers tonight are all pre-recorded, but you'll be able to chat and comment with us during the show or in between readings.
So grab the beverage of your choice, sit back, and enjoy. You can also find updates from us online at tuesdayfunk.org, as well as on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at tuesdayfunk. Okay, we've got a great show for you tonight, so let's just get started. Our first reader this evening was born in Brooklyn, New York, and now resides in the Chicago suburbs. She has worked for Essence Communications as a photo editor, the Harlem Children's Zone as managing editor of Harlem Overheard, StoryCorps as a facilitator coordinator, and Goldman Sachs as a long-term administrative temp/secret ethnographer. She is a 2008 graduate of Clarion West and a proud alum of Columbia University School of General Studies, majoring in anthropology. She has been home for 135 days and is feeling it. You can find her on social media at Harford Tracy if you want to find out where her slush submissions end up. But in the meantime, please welcome Tracy Harford-Porter.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Harford-Porter, and I'm so happy to be here today. I wish I could be with you in person at Hopleaf with Eden and Andrew, but we will see each other in person hopefully soon. In the meantime, let's do this. This is an excerpt from a longer story titled Ghost in My Head, which is about a young girl who receives a strange gift and has to choose whether she will use it to fight her emotional and physical demons. Here we are meeting her for the first time. In the principal's office, there was a poster, one of many. That poster was of an adult male and a middle school boy, back to back, with arms crossed like a 90s buddy sitcom. Underneath their pose, the text read, "The principal is your pal!" Exclamation mark. It was on the wall, directly to the right of Mr. Newman's head, which was pink and shiny under a scrim of white blonde thinning hair. A golden contorted Jesus was directly over his head, nailed to a wooden cross. To his left, an old bookcase, sagging with old workbooks and binders. His desk. "So, what do you think?" Marjorie blinked back into reality. Mr. Newman stared at her expectantly. Below the pink head, blue eyes, a blunt potatoey face. She looked at the digital clock on his desk and realized he'd been talking so long about the box on his desk that classes were officially done for the day. She was going to be late getting home. "I'm not sure. I'll have to ask my mom." "How is she?" Marjorie hated that sound, that fake nice sound, that nosy sound. "You already know enough about me and mine," she thought. The embarrassment and anger rose up, and Marjorie felt her face and neck redden. "She's doing well, getting better every day." Good. He cleared his throat. "Here we go," Marjorie thought, "the real reason I've been summoned. Well, if she's doing better, I'd love to call or even FaceTime tonight so we can review the benefits of the program. Both of you, I think, you obviously, and financially for your mom, and even the school could benefit. This is a beta test, and as a result, participants, their families, and supporting institutions will be appropriately compensated for the risk management." He paused for a moment. "Well, this," he held up the informational folder, "is a lot. I think I'd best explain tonight. How much do we owe?" she blurted. Mr. Newman's whole face became as pink as his head. "Good," thought Marjorie. "Now we match." "You are 4 months behind on tuition." "I can explain to my mom. Is everything in the box?" "Yes, and this folder has all the information you need." Now that the uncomfortable words were out, Mr. Newman seemed ready to be rid of her. He handed her a folder with the logo Clear Box Co. printed on the front. She opened the folder, and on the left pocket was a thick sheaf of contracts. On the right, several pamphlets addressing an alphabet soup of ailments that Clear Box Co. claimed to cure forever and ever. She closed the folder and slid it into her book bag. "And the box, don't forget that." He smiled at her thinly. pushed the slate gray monolith toward her. She stood and grabbed the box off his desk. It was surprisingly heavy. She felt something, a liquid, slosh inside it. She placed the box inside her bag next to the folder. Is there anything else, Principal Newman? Actually, yes. I noticed that you hadn't put in your order for a class ring or paid for the graduation trip. You know, you are the only student in your class that hasn't, so the secretaries and I would like to pay for your ring and trip as a graduation gift. A final indignity. Marjorie wanted to cry. Thank you, but I'm really looking forward to getting a ring in high school or college. And I don't really want to go on the field trip anyway. Oh, well, if you change your mind, I won't. And with that, Marjorie fled. Although Marjorie rushed home in a panic, she stopped in front of her apartment door to take a breath and calm herself before seeing her mother. She unlocked the door and entered quietly. She smelled and heard the sauce pois bubbling on the stove, the chicken in the oven. Tati Josette was here today instead of a home attendant. She walked to her mother's bedroom, paused, and then entered. The room was clean and bright, but the smell of sickness still burnt her nose and turned her stomach. Tati Josette, plastic basin in one hand, washcloth in the other, was bathing her sister in bed as efficiently as a nurse. Hey, Mommy, Tati Josette. Tati Josette folded the washcloth on the rim of the plastic basin, placed it on the floor, and began adjusting Mommy's thin frame back into a comfortable position. Hey yourself, young lady, you are late. Tati's voice was mild, but Marjorie knew she was annoyed. She had her own kids to pick up after school. I'm sorry, the principal kept me after school. Marjorie nervously brushed down her wrinkled uniform skirt. I hope you aren't bringing trouble to your mother. No, Tati. She studied her briefly, assessed, and gave a quick nod. I have to go. Can you clean up for me? Dinner is almost done. You just have to check on the chicken. Of course, Tati. Thank you. No problem for my favorite niece. She kissed Mommy, then Marjorie, then hustled out the door. Mommy and Marjorie waited a moment in silence until they heard the front door shut. Why? Mommy's voice was sharp, raspy. She needed water. There's this program for dummies like me he wanted me to tell you about. Neurodivergent, it's brilliantly unique. Let me get your water. No. Tell me. Marjorie pulled out the folder and handed it to Mommy. She opened it, her thin fingers quickly rifling through the brochures. Marjorie took the box out of her bag and placed it on on the bedstand next to the medicine bottles and stacks of bills and tissues. So it's like an AI that is always with you to help you stay motivated and keep you on task, but it's private and talking in your head so kids won't make fun of you. The front door opened again. Hey, Mom. Davis, come in here, Mommy said. You sound terrible. I'm bringing you water. Davis came in bearing a frosty glass. Davis, the golden mahogany boy, perfect in every way, beautiful, tall basketball star, Ivy League bound. If Mommy died, she made sure Davis wouldn't be stuck with taking care of Marjorie. Marjorie would stay with Tati Josette and her baby cousins while Davis wowed the world at Harvard or MIT or UC Berkeley or whoever gave him the most money to go because he really was worth it. Hey, Mom. Hey, kiddo. Why the frown? Marjorie has been asked to participate in a program that, Mommy squinted at the brochure, will maximize her capabilities and supercharge executive function. Davis saw the gray box and frowned. That's a clear box booster. I've read about these. Of course you have, Marjorie thought bitterly, then instantly felt ashamed. He walked over to the nightstand, grabbed the box, and opened it. Inside sleek white packaging enveloped two things: a tiny silver button and a clear glass bottle filled with about a pint of milky liquid that cast an iridescent sheen. He held the bottle up to the nightstand lamp. Wow, they really use nanites. Wait, she has to drink that, Mommy asked. Yep, and the button is for subvocalization so she can talk back to the AI. I heard they were getting rid of the button, but maybe they just wanted to roll it out. Davis, yeah, Mom? Davis, I know you're excited about this, but I don't know about Marjorie being some sort of guinea pig drinking computer stuff, nanites. I don't care what they're called. No one is experimenting on Marjorie. Mommy, Marjorie said, they will give us money. There was a beat in which no one said anything. The air hung heavy with the knowledge that all three knew that they were on the precipice financially and had been for months. Mommy opened the folder again, looked through the contract. She looked up at Marjorie. They are offering so much money that I know it is blood money. Give everything back to that principal and tell him Tati Josette will bring him a payment on Monday. But Mom, Davis said, no. She held up her skeletal finger to Marjorie. Do you want to look like me? Do you want rich people to use you up like they did me my entire life? Your medicine works. Not always, Marjorie said. That part medicine cannot fix. Only you can learn and apply discipline to your life. You cannot drink discipline. You can only learn it. Yes, Mommy. I'll check on dinner, said Davis. I'll clean the basin, Mommy. Why don't you get some rest? Marjorie grabbed the basin and went to the shared hallway bathroom. She chucked the washcloth into the laundry hamper and emptied the basin into the toilet. The dirty water smelled like infection and death. So that's it for now. This is part of a longer piece that will be in a slush pile soon. And if you're interested in finding out more, I'll keep folks posted on my submissions at Harford Tracy on Twitter. Anyway, have a great day.
Our second reader emerges from creative hibernation every 7 to 12 years, but is endeavoring to increase that frequency. Previous efforts include 2011's hastily produced YouTube parody, Fake Month at the Museum, as well as a short film in 1999 that granted an invitation to the Golden Globe Awards, where he peed next to John Lithgow. In addition to YouTubing and peeing, Kyle has spent his adult life as a caricature artist, an IMAX projectionist, and a corporate PowerPoint designer for a multinational conglomerate of high-tech weapon systems and golf cart manufacturers. Until he fills the hole in his resume where Zamboni driver should be, he'll be hard at work on the perfect Die Hard screenplay and occasionally tweeting at Lazy Cartoonist. Please welcome Kyle Thiessen.
Thank you, Eden, wherever you may be. I hope you're staying safe. What I'm about to read was supposed to be a lot shorter, and then it got out of control. So now I'm going to just read an excerpt. When I was a kid, I used to read movie novelizations. I loved them. And there was one guy who wrote my favorite novelizations. His name was George Geipp. George Geipp had a number of original novels under his belt, and he also co-wrote the screenplays to a couple of Steve Martin movies, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid and The Man with Two Brains. And then in 1986, he died from an allergic reaction to a bee sting. And that's all I know about him, other than before he died, he wrote his most infamous novelization, which was Back to the Future. He had started writing it based on a very early draft of the screenplay, and as the studio gave him subsequent revisions, he just kept writing forward without changing anything that came before it. It's a strangely incohesive and yet playful novelization that bears very little resemblance to the final movie. And I love the idea of somebody writing a novelization who just doesn't give a shit. So I am going to read a small section of a fake novelization of a fake 80s movie that I imagine stars Steve Guttenberg and Baird Oliver. I think that's all you need to know. It's about a sommelier and his son. I won't even go into the plot. It's irrelevant. Never mind that. Here we go. The Dodge Aries squeaked to a halt in front of Anstey Vineyards, not that there was a sign or even a vineyard to identify it. The premises consisted of a lonesome industrial storage facility that by appearances had made a lifetime of bad choices. This must be Anstey Vineyards, said Paul. Like its namesake, the diminutive yet intimidating Tommy Anstey, that which the aging wooden warehouse lacked in size, it made up for with a lot of threatening angles and dubious integrity. I guess I should wait here, Dickie said hopefully. You should come inside. I'll show you that your old man has the best nose in the business. Paul smiled proudly, but Dickie didn't care. Dickie was still figuring out if this place was occupied or abandoned. He'd believe either. It It was like Schrodinger's warehouse. Dickie trudged behind his father to the front door, or more accurately, a plank of corrugated metal leaning against a clearly unintentional opening. Above it, a handwritten sign read, "Closed." Before Paul could commit a single knock, the panel skidded away, and they were greeted by a high-pitched voice assigned to a large pinstripe suit filled with angry meat.
"You Mr. Bultitude?"
said the giant soprano. "Paul Bultitude, yes. Tommy is expecting me?"
"Mr. Anstey to you. Who's the kid?"
"That's Dickie," said Paul, "and I'm sorry, I thought Mr. Anstey went by Tommy."
"Mr. Anstey says things have been too informal lately.
He lifted an arm.
So now we gotta wear these suits and call everyone Mr. Who's the kid?"
"Mr. Dickie," said Dickie.
"Tough break. Follow me,"
said the high-pitched voice, and so the Bultitudes tailed Mr. Pinstriped Meat through the hole in the wall. It didn't seem possible that a warehouse so tiny could accommodate this many barrels of wine. Countless stacks of 60-gallon oak casks in every direction, at least a dozen per stack, swayed like the columns of Pompeii. The lowest barrels were bleeding under the weight. Dickie knew no reputable winemaker would stack barrels like this, but he couldn't deny that the use of space in here was an inspiration. Mr. Meat escorted Paul and Dickie through the labyrinthine wine columns to a desk on the other side of the storeroom. On that desk rested 3 uncorked bottles, each chaperoned by its own empty glass. And behind that desk, in a wobbly chair made of the same wood as everything else, sat Mr. Anstey. Paul extended his right hand and sped his gait to greet Anstey, not realizing there was still a considerable distance to the desk. His quick strut awkwardly persisted for some time. Truly remarkable use of the real estate, this warehouse. "No kids," grunted Anstey through the food in his mouth, or maybe that's just what he sounded like. Paul promptly halted his advance.
"But that's Mr. Dickie, sir,"
said Pinstriped Meat. "What?" Anstey looked down at his crotch and held perfectly still as though it might help him hear better.
"Mr. Dickie,"
repeated the high-pitched voice. "Don't you dare say that again," Anstey said, holding up his arm as if to block the view of a thing he'd prefer not to understand. "Tell him to wait outside. He smells like trouble." Paul sheepishly nodded at Dickie, who needed no further encouragement to retreat. Tommy Anstey rose from his chair, which continued to wobble with nobody in it. He, too, wore an unscrupulously tight pinstriped suit. Anstey's aging frame hobbled around to the front of the desk and settled in a confident lean, facing deliberately toward Paul, arms crossed. "You gonna shake my hand or what?" "Of course!" A glow from the completion of his triumphant journey to Anstey's hand, Paul nodded at the wines on the desk. "What have we got here?" Anstey's eyes lit up. "I call them tres leches," he beamed. "You know what leche means? It means milk. These are my 3 milks. I feed them to the world from right here." Anstey placed one of his calloused hands under his left pectoral and squeezed aggressively 3 times, as though counting along in his head. "I don't doubt it," said Paul. "But what kind of wines are they?" "I'm getting to it, Jesus," snapped Anstey, turning toward the bottles. "But we can skip to that part if you insist, Your Majesty." Dickie didn't have the keys to the Aries, so he resigned himself to stargazing from the roof of the car, denting the hell out of it. Why did I have to be the son of a sommelier, Dickie wondered, for not the first time. Other guys have dads with normal jobs like telemarketers and art models. How did I get stuck with a wine sniffer? Dickie squinted at the blinking light of an airplane, or maybe a satellite, and followed its trajectory across the night sky. What if I had a cool dad, he thought. Like, say, a New York Times best-selling author, the kind Mom reads. Then I'd have a dad that Mom also likes. As the satellite, or maybe airplane, vanished behind a cloud, Dickie sank back into the harsh reality of the dented Aries. If my dad were a New York Times best-selling author, he thought, he'd probably find a way to blow it, and then Mom would leave him, and he'd have to live under a bridge for a while, recovering from a cocaine habit, until his agent tossed him a bone out of pity and got him a gig writing a movie novelization. Dickie rolled onto one side, and the roof emitted a metallic pop. The pop awoke another noise, a jingling of car keys, perhaps, or from the other side of the sickly lit parking lot. Dickie sat up. Is this even a parking lot? These cars were parked in the grass. The keys drew nearer. Dad? Something shadowy moved in the weeds between 2 rental vans. A snake, maybe? With keys? Dickie squinted again. Oh, it was a chain. And it was attached to a Doberman. I'm offering a hell of a deal on these 40 cases. A hell of a deal. I appreciate that, Tommy. Mr. Anstey. Paul took a second to rub his temples. But what kind of wine is it? It's white wine. Okay, Paul continued patiently. Do we know where it's from? Just never you mind where it's from, Anstey suggested, only it wasn't a suggestion. Paul tried to ignore the creaking of the barrels, or maybe they were trembling on his behalf. Very well, but there are many kinds of white wine, and I'm trying to ascertain, is it a Riesling? And if so, is it German? And if so, is it from Mosel, Rheingau, Pfalz? Anstey placed one hand on the bottle of wine and looked at his crotch again to listen. What did you call me? Before Paul could comprehend the bizarre threat evolving in front of him, the unmistakable clang of corrugated sheet metal detonated from the opposite end of the storeroom. This sound was followed by, what are those, keys? Dog! Screamed Dickie, serpentining his way through the shaky pillars at a pace which, under other circumstances, would be ill-advised. Deep, aggressive barks emphasized Dickie's point. Dickie? Said Paul, craning his neck to see through the barrels.
Gardenia?
Said Mr. Pinstriped Meat, whose neck was too thick to crane. Meat! You were supposed to put that thing to sleep, Anstey yelled, and by God, his name is actually Meat. Meat's lip quivered.
He's so cute.
Dickie's sneakers squealed at every turn on the lacquered cement floor. The deceptively enormous square footage no longer gave him the tingles of wonderment. Dickie, I'm coming, pal! Paul lunged for his son, but got his arm caught in Anstey's vice-like paw. Who brings a child to a wine tasting, said Anstey through clenched teeth, in an unmarked warehouse with a grass parking lot? Paul shook his arm free, or probably Anstey let go. My ex-wife is out of town. Your child, Anstey said, is almost old enough to drive. Now, amidst the chain and the barking and the sneaker squeals, and Dickie repeatedly shouting dog for some reason, a high-pitched voice joined the chorus.
Gardenia, come here, baby.
Damn dog trained him to sniff the specific aftershave of a former business associate. Is that kid wearing aftershave? Anstey shook his head. This is a criminal enterprise. Why would you bring a child to a criminal enterprise? I thought I only need to pick up 10 very legal cases of wine. Take the 40 and we'll call it even. I'm driving an Aries. I can't fit 40. All things considered, Dickie was doing an exemplary job of navigating those barrels. Alas, Tommy Anstey and his associate Meat were not reputable winemakers, and so the stacking wasn't a great idea. Hence it was that one barrel, a barrel Dickie was sprinting past as his father lamented the spatial constraints of a 1984 Dodge Aries, couldn't help but bleed out. The barrel's contents, more precisely vin de Té, a Cab Franc made in a style similar to carbonic maceration, using mainly whole clusters for fermentation of a lighter, youthful, brambly style that's intended to be drunk lightly chilled, not that Anstey knew any of that, ruptured across the lacquered cement on which Dickie's sneakers would have otherwise retained traction. He skidded forward when he meant to cut left, careened into a particularly unstable obelisk of vino, and in a sensational pageant of cacophonous gushing mayhem, this column dominoed into that column and so on and so forth, and one would imagine it is a spectacle well worth the price of admission to see it all unfold in the cinema. Dickie sat up and wiped the red liquid from his eyes, checking his hands to make sure none of it was blood, but who could really tell? Nearby, a high-pitched voice moaned,
Oh, my gardenia.
And for a moment, Dickie's heart sank that the Doberman met a grisly demise under a barrel. He propped himself over the splintered remains of a nearby cask and was concurrently relieved and ambivalent that Gardenia was no less sprightly than before, now affectionately licking the wine on Meat's cheeks. Meat was all a giggle. Dickie, you're okay. Paul scrambled gracelessly through the splinters and muck to embrace his son, who did not embrace back. I'm not, Dickie said. This is the dumbest life. Hey, bring your kid to work day, called out Tommy Anstey from the spot he never moved from this whole time. You're buying a whole lot more than 40 cases. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
Our next reader is a Southern person living in Chicago. Her poems have appeared in the chapbooks Breathtaken and No Experiences, and in Entropy magazine. When it's not a pandemic out, she co-hosts other people's poems at Uncharted Books, as well as the Basement Life reading series in Avondale. When it is a pandemic out, she enjoys the company of her dog Basil, her day job with a food bank, and her record collection. She also makes zines that you can find at Quimby's, Uncharted, and online. Please clap for Erin Watson.
What's up, Tuesday Funk? This is Erin Watson coming to you live from Avondale, from my home office, where I'm going to read you some angry socialist quarantine poetry, some poems about birds, and some poems that I wrote with a neural network on the internet. Rest in peace, talk to transformer.com. It is no longer freely available for me to shitpost into, and it's very sad. But first, here are a few things that I've written in these current fraught times. This is called Heroes Work Here. They call you a hero before they let you die, the faceless they who sit on our public chest like smog, like the particles and dust from the old power plant ripped from the sky in La Velita on a Sunday morning. How they advertise its replacement power in Spanish on billboards. Land stolen for purchase. Inquire within. They call you a hero, and then they ask for more. Another hour, another dollar, a new chamber in your hurting heart. Another field of seeds and the water and sun to grow them. Let there be light. Another stream of tears, but let it be beautiful, a river, not a flood. They call you a hero and they don't see your face, essential as a smile, not a wound, but a delight, a fresh bushel of fruit laid over the family table, a pair of hands to hold. They call you a hero, then they forget your name. They don't call. They call you nothing. They round you down. They grind your edges into worn limestone steps. They praise your sharpness, then they leave it for sea glass, cloudy and buried, tough and small. Before they let you die, they call you a hero. They stand over your grave and say how tragic that nothing could be done. They leave you in the ground and they sleep soundly. So that's probably the angriest thing I've ever written. And here are a couple poems from a series that I'm currently working on about passerines, which are a category of birds. Includes all the perching birds and the songbirds. This one's called First Robin. Everyone said the world was ending. I stood in my window watering the houseplants. I called to them out the window. I called them on the phone and told them it's not true. Just because your eyes are closed, it didn't make you blind. Listen, I said, the birds are coming back. The world is as much as the air and the birds. The world is turning. The world is still here. The billboards spread their wings over the freeway sky. It only feels like the end of the world. When the world really ends, you won't feel a thing. This is the last bird poem I'll read. It's called Avondale Mourning Doves. Cottonwood, said the woman in the rhinestone ball cap that spelled, I heart Jesus in rainbow plastic as she bent to touch the roadside fluff. Cottonwood, it looks like snow. A smile, a small good thing, and I assemble an ecology of tenderness from painted rocks and paper cranes, teddy bears and printed fists raised against all that would hold our worlds apart. As common as pigeons, as lovely as doves, the cottonwoods sentry the season. Ask any tree you want for any blessing freely given. The wide catalpas and the tough old honey locust, service berries in March and the crab apples in June. Ask the trees to tell you how to make it through the year. Shout out to the forest preserves. Shout out to the honey locust in my front yard. Shout out to the Chicago Park District. And now, robot poems. I still have a few copies left of this, both in my house and at Uncharted and Quimby's, as far as I know. Support your local bookstores. Feel free to hit me up for trades. I love to trade zines. I'm going to read one poem where this neural network auto-completed a sentence I wrote by thinking I was William Blake or George Orwell, and then I'll read the title poem from this collection. There are eyes on the street, and there are eyes beyond our faces. There are eyes tied to our minds and eyes and minds. They know and they watch. William Blake. How can I stop a war? There are eyes on the street, and there are eyes beyond our faces. There are eyes tied to our minds and eyes and minds. They know, they watch, and they do nothing, but they wait. George Orwell, 1984. Here are eyes on the streets, and there are eyes on the inside of cars, in the crowd, or in traffic, or at lunch hour, or anywhere in the dark. William Blake. How can I stop a war? The eyes are on the earth. The eyes are on the cities. The eyes are on their streets. The eyes are on those houses. The eyes are on what the cities produce, from the trees to the weeds in the streets, from the children in the playground to the families on the streets. William Blake. Here are the lights, the eyes on. This is the last poem I'll read. Thanks again to Eden and Andrew for putting this on. Thanks to everyone for watching. Support your local Black, Indigenous, people of color. People have the power. Stay out in the streets until we get more justice and more peace. Here's a silly poem. I am a hard femme who loves the baseball fellow Javi Baez, and can't nobody tell me nothing about his S hug me, C as hug me. I will do anything for him. I am a baleen whale. I am the last female whale in the world. I am not a real whale. I am a woman. A woman is a hard woman. I am a girl. A girl, like an apple, is a hard apple. I am a sweet baby. Welcome to the keep, you miracle. Beef is in the keep, and the wife is a sperm. I hope every pony has a rich and heartful family. I fear we will become disgusting, but maybe we are so unworthy, so we must become disgusting. I am an islander and I'm a whale. I am the endless Wather's job. I have a fifth leg. Thanks again, everybody. Take care, be well, stay safe, stay sane.
Thanks to Hopleaf and our bartender Leah, and thank you, lovely audience members. We hope to see all of you soon. We don't know when Tuesday Funk will be back at Hopleaf yet, but we will keep you posted. Our September 1st show will also be virtual. Visit tuesdayfunk.org to learn more and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, etc. for updates. Hope you'll join us one way or another on September 1st.
Okay, we're going to take a brief intermission so you can refill your drink and visit the bathroom. But before you do, I do want to draw your attention to a couple of ways you can thank the readers. This is a free show, and while Chicago's live lit scene is an excellent way to for writers to gain an audience and to see how their work comes across, it's not really making anybody any money. So if you're up for it, please Venmo a donation to me at ME3DIA, and we'll divvy up the funds between all of the readers. Eden and I are not going to take any of it. It all goes to them. By the way, the Hopleaf is now open for patio and limited indoor seating, as well as for takeout. So if you'd like to give them a little of your time and money, they'd really appreciate it too. And hopefully we can be back there sometime soon. You can see the comments for links. No pressure, but thanks for thinking about it and doing it in advance.
Our next guest is a freelance writer and performer living in Albany Park. She's currently working for the U.S. Census, so make sure you get your stats in at 2020census.gov. 2020 has been a lot, so she's trying to maintain balance between existential ennui, denial, and time to produce/create. She's the creator of Chirp Radio's story series The First Time, and is looking forward to the day when she can make more of her imaginings come to fruition. You can currently find her at 3leftproductions.com and all over the web at Smussiole. Please give a Tuesday Funk welcome to Jocelyn Geboy.
I have this thing with people I love, my familiars, personalities that light up a room, whose mere presence warm my heart. Sometimes in specific moments, I think of them fondly and wish they were here. But the times I miss them something fierce, it's when we come back together and they're right in front of me. It's odd to yearn for someone who is in the middle of giving you a hug, but the ache is visceral and deep. It's a little sort of out of sight, out of mind. I don't find myself walking around pining for their company. The moment we're together, though, it's like all of me wakes up and remembers all the things I've forgotten. The road trips, the secrets told, the shoulders cried on, passionate debates, crazy laughs, insane theories. Standing in front of me, I can't help but feel every last feel. I'm acutely aware of how fleeting it all is. They'll be leaving soon, going back to LA or their travel adventures or returning to their new home. I try and savor our time together, but I sometimes ruin the opportunity by missing them when we're in the midst of reconvening. Instead of drinking them in like a woman dying of thirst, I find myself longing for that time when I drank the clearest, coolest water. It's truly ridiculous at the end of the day. One of the things I've claimed is a low-key fear that I'll die alone. The witticisms like to tell me, we all die alone. Yeah, I fucking get it. It's a solo trip. But there are people who die alone, with no one to witness their exit, no one to be near to send them off with a whisper. I guess this is because I'm not married, not opposed, just a little late, childless, thank God, I never wanted them, and feel like to a small degree that I am on this journey alone. The thing is, I have lots and lots of friends from recovery worlds. I have a crazy, amazing group of friends granted to me by the internets and Twitter. I have people all over that I know love me and wish the best for me. I even have a niece and nephew that might show up for their old aunt. It's pretty ridiculous at the end of the day. My dad died in October of 2014. I had a moment the other day when I was struck dumb by the fact that it's been nearly 6 years. It's on the latter half of a decade. This can't be true, can it? There's no way that we've just gone along for 6 years, really. How does time move? How does space change? When I think about my dad's last moments, I remember being alone while people finally got some rest. I was the assumptive person to stand guard, eldest daughter. Now it's just him and me, dropping morphine in his mouth on the hour to send him off peacefully. Was I getting enough in? Should I be giving him more? I contemplated it before, what I'd do if my father asked me to end it. I'd do it. He would eviscerate me, but I would have done it. But he hadn't asked, and I was afraid of killing him without permission. I was tortured. I just wanted to do the right thing. That's the memory that stays with me in a way I can't describe. I didn't fall apart after my dad died. I'd been pre-grieving him for years. I'd already imagined myriad ways he would come to his untimely demise. After a kidney transplant, 3 hip replacements, cataract surgeries, a mini stroke, getting a pacemaker, diabetes, and a love for the drink. Cancer was the last thing I saw coming. When he departed, I wasn't afraid of where he was or what he'd become. I was not racked with deep sadness. Yet something else happened in the days and the months and the years after. I tell stories and make references to relay his personality to my people because I don't want them to forget a man they never knew. I know my friends are probably really fucking over it. I guess it's a similar sentiment to not wanting to die alone. It's really that I don't want to be forgotten. It's behind the drive to be remembered, saving all of my journals, all of my writings, letters written and received, every photograph and knick-knack and every last memory. Some people imagine their funerals. I have this hope that maybe someday they'll find it all and I'll be posthumously exalted. It's really sort of ridiculous at the end of the day. I have a friend named Corey. I suppose I should be using the past tense, but I think it's like having a sibling that dies or always being a Marine. You always have a brother. You're always a Marine. She's still my friend even though she's not physically here with us. She was always one of those friends, the kind that you might not talk to for months, But the minute you call or see each other again, it's like no time went by at all. Diving right back into the same storylines and secrets and gossip and sarcasm about everything and nothing at all. Catching up on the particulars, but just as familiar as ever. I've been connected to the internet and social media for a long time. More so, I've made friends, real-life, long-lasting friends, via the World Wide Webs in various forms and fashions. Facebook, Friendster, Twitter, and Yahoo groups. After Lifestyle was a group dedicated to fans of author Tom Robbins. He's one of those you love him or you hate him magnets. A linguist at heart, he mixes and matches and moves words around in a way that is poetic. Alliteration and allegory are some of his specialties. He's a magical realist. My favorite Tom Robbins book, Skinny Legs and All, stars a motley crew of characters, most notably Cannel Beans, Dirty Sock, Spoon, Painted Stick, and Conch Shell. We'd all talk Tom Robbins and everything else under the sun. Much like Facebook, I spent a lot of time there when I should have been doing something else. I found myself knit into a tight group of invisible friends. I still talk to people all over the country I met there. But Corey lived in Chicago, so we were able to meet up and hang out. Like most of my dear friendships, I could not tell you when we became so close. She was one of 2 people who was kind enough to listen to me cry in despair the summer of 2001 when I was diagnosed bipolar and became estranged from my closest friends, and the world turned upside down. We shared deep, dark secrets, dinners and drives and cigarettes. She saw me get sober, and I saw her go through law school. Corey met a guy, and they fell in love and got married. A bunch of the Tom Robbins crew flew out to Vegas, seeing the sights and standing attention as Corey and Jason were wed in a little white chapel in order to get their marriage license. Next day in Tacoma, California, in a blink of a town in the Mojave Desert, we gathered at a friend Amy's hot spring resort. We all conspired to come together to make sure that Cannel Beans, Dirty Sock, Spoon, Painted Stick, and Conch Shell showed up to give their blessing. She moved to Denver. Months, sometimes years went by, and we zapped each other here and there. We'd hang out and talk for hours, and you'd think she'd never left. In the last few years, it seemed like she was disappearing a little, sliding into depression, worried for the future. I didn't have much guidance about careers or marriages, but I hope she always knew I was interested and available to help in any way I could. In the winter of 2019, I got a text from her brother. As friends do, I had met her family on several occasions and came to know them in a detached sort of way. So I was confused. Why was Erin texting me? It was like the time you get a call late at night from someone who goes to bed at 10, or when you see someone's name in your voicemail who only ever sends you texts. It was weird. I called him to find out that Corey was dead. She had killed herself. A million thoughts rolled around my head. Why hadn't I stayed in closer contact? What about her son? How did she do it? Why? Why wasn't she able to see that anything is fixable but that? Anything but that. Alcoholism and addiction, mental health and suicide, these are far from foreign to me. I've been to more funerals than I'd like to count. But generally, the people closest to me have managed to stick around. God, Corey, how did you fall prey to the lie that this was the only way out? Smart and determined, so witty and wise, so friendly and generous. How did you fall for that ridiculous lie? Corey's funeral was in the suburbs of Illinois, and I was sure to attend. It was a solemn affair, as these things usually are, and I was often at a loss for words. As we walked away from her grave, I found myself next to her brother-in-law. I couldn't help it. I asked, how did she... He said she had a gun. I was stunned. My mind went through a second million thoughts. She had a gun? For how long? Where? What? Suicide by gun is normally a man's game, but it made sense for Corey in some respects. She wasn't to suffer fools gladly. If she came to that definitive decision, she most certainly was not going to fuck it up. It made absolutely no sense, and all the sense in the world. Corey's been on my mind a lot lately. I don't know why, but summer seems to give me more of an opportunity to reflect on people I've lost. I have found myself unexpectedly wistful many a summer, for my dad, for other friends, now for Corey. I don't believe that completing suicide is selfish. I know when we come to believe that the only way to fix our predicament, the only thing that makes sense is to exit the stage permanently, we're lost in a way we can't understand. We absolutely cannot see that our thoughts and feelings will pass. They're not permanent. It's its own kind of grief, knowing this didn't have to happen. A grief that seems ridiculous in some way. Separation, insecurity, longing, fear, grief. That's where we've been for months now. The collective burden of shared trauma. It's hard to really understand. Much like childhood dysfunction, many of us think that as long as our parents were married and no one was beating us and we had food on the table, that we had a normal childhood. Until we end up in therapy years later, only to find out we suffer from the post-traumatic stress disorder of 1,000 tiny paper cuts. It takes longer, but the blood still flows. Even understanding that, it's hard to be in the midst of an inescapable situation. They say when dogs are abused, they eventually just give up and assume this is how it's going to be. It's called learned helplessness. I feel like I'm slipping into it. The idea that I'll just have to live like this. I can't remember the last time someone hugged me. The thought that I will forever have to be cautious and skeptical everywhere I go. Face masked, sanitizer at the ready. The premise that life will just never be the same. I've been all around the stages of grief. I'm currently angry. The idea that it all didn't have to be like this is fucking infuriating. That even if there was evil, intentional fuckery to start, it still didn't have to be like this. The fact that I live somewhere where people believe in science and care about each other and worked really hard to make it so we kind of started to see a glimmer of hope. And then there are other people walking around refusing to admit anything is happening, or worse yet, know it's happening and refuse to do anything about it. Fuck you. Does anyone really think any of us are super stoked to wear masks everywhere? They suck. Does anyone really think that all of us crazy libs have been waiting for the day when we don't have dinner parties, or game nights, or sleepovers, or movie nights? That we've been hoping to erase baseball games and amusement parks and theater and live music from our lives? Is it really possible anyone thinks that we're currently living our best lives? We're not. We're all living in grief of some sort. Some acute, people who have lost their loved ones, people who have not been able to be there for their last breath. Some dull, missing the days when you could go into a coffee shop and hang out or shop at Jewel in the middle of the night. Some of it comes and goes, to and fro, much like the grief you feel when your dad dies or you have a bad breakup or your friend kills herself. Sometimes you think you should be sad and you're not. And sometimes the most random thing comes along and breaks your heart. We're the victims of people acting the fool. When one kid does something stupid as fuck and now your teacher says you can't go to Great America. It's like, why are we all being punished because Brian was an asshole? Leave his sorry ass home. But no, he had to ruin everything. It's really fucking ridiculous at the end of the day.
Our final guest this evening would simply like to remind everyone that Black Lives Matter. Please welcome Norman Doucet.
Good evening, Tuesday Funk. I am Norm Doucet, and I would first like to send a shout out and thanks to Andrew Huffman and Eden Robbins for the opportunity to present at this Tuesday Funk, and also to Hopleaf virtually. I cannot wait for the day where we can all gather at Hopleaf and listen to wonderful writers read their stuff, and then you might hear me read some of my terrible stuff as well. Looking forward to that day. And so this one's a little different for me. I generally write something at the last minute, like the day before or the day of, and then I get on stage and I read it and then I cry. But this one's a little different. I haven't written anything. This is completely unscripted, and I think this is also apropos for 2020. And so I'm just gonna talk about some stuff, and I hope that it connects to some of you that are watching this. So 2020, right? It's been a shit show of a year. I will say though, my shit show of year started in January of 2018 when my grandmother passed away, who raised me, and then that really was a terrible thing. And then a year later, in January of 2019, my mother passed away, and then in March of 2019, my stepfather passed away. I found out very recently that the very first love of my adult life, a woman by the name of Linda Della Rosa, passed away in March of 2019. I didn't find that out until about 3 weeks ago. And then a whole host of other things happened in my life that aren't important for this story, but they were mildly traumatic. And then we roll into 2020, and there's hope, and there's all this stuff, and life's going to be okay. And then coronavirus hits. It's like, okay, then we're quarantined. And then we roll into the murder of George Floyd. And so what I'm going to talk about is something that is sensitive and important to me, and it's my racial identity. Clearly, I'm a black man. But until very recently, and I'll get into that in a moment, I was sort of like a ninja about not being a black guy for decades. And so my mom, who was a school teacher and also worked at an ice cream parlor part-time, we were poor. My father, my bio dad jetted, left when I was 4 or 5, I can't remember, and left my mom with me, and so my mom had me. I was an only child. She was a school teacher. She worked at an ice cream parlor part-time. We were in public assistance. We lived in a housing project for a while. My mom did this thing that she called stretching the bills, and so there's like this rolling temporary termination of services. So like 1 month, like the lights would go out literally, like the lights would get cut off for 3 days until her paycheck came, and then the lights would come back on, and then halfway through the next month, like gas would turn off for like 3 days, and so we'd eat bologna sandwiches for 3 days until the gas came on. She was like patching things together, and she called it stretching the bills. So I grew up this way, and it is what it is. But the one thing that my mom said to me a lot, probably thousands of times, was this is not going to be your future. And a part of her philosophy was that as a black person in America, we have a black culture which handicaps us from success, because success is not achieved in the black culture unless you can run a football or throw a football or shoot a basketball, which I was not really good at. So if you didn't do that, you need to go to college, you need to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a corporate person. And in order to do that, you needed to be able to walk and talk and operate within the confines of white society. And so what you did essentially was, even in the housing project, segregate me from other black people. And so she did that by sacrificing money to send me to Catholic school. That was the reason for the ice cream shop job. So she sent me to Catholic school so that I could be around white people and understand how white society worked and like white culture worked and all that stuff. And she also understood that they would get rid of my black Southern affectations, my language, and such. And so she sacrificed there. I did not hang out with black kids at all, even in a housing project that was 100% black. I was able to, it was like being in prison. So like my grandmother, my mom was at the ice cream shop, and my grandmother would walk the 4 or 5 blocks from her house down to the yard of the housing project where all the kids played. And my grandmother would sit on a wooden fence, and like I had like a perimeter, and I could like run around. And if any of the other kids were like, my nickname, by the way, as a kid is B. So if any other kids came and said, beep, 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 my grandmother would shoo them away. I'm like, nope, he's doing his exercise on the yard. And then he's going to go and he's going to do homework, his French homework or his math homework. And so I was segregated from other black kids, although I was embedded and lived in a housing project. So my mom did this, and she was very diligent about this, and she was very adamant about this. And so I went to college. I went to a college called the Citadel, which is a military college in Charleston. It was founded in 1842 as a reaction to the Nat Turner slave revolt, in which they said, wow, like Nat Turner actually killed a bunch of white people because we didn't have weapons, access to weapons, so we need to have an arsenal or an armory where we put our weapons. And so they built a structure that's now a hotel in Charleston, which is humorous. And they put a bunch of weapons in it, and they said, who are going to guard the weapons? And they chose a bunch of orphans to guard the weapons. And then a societal woman from Charleston said, well, you have to educate the orphans. You can't just have them guard the weapons. Hence, a college was founded in 1842. So anyway, I digress. And so throughout my adult life, when everyone would, anything happen, the thing in LA where the police beat the guy on the street, like, I'm like, whatever. I managed to, like, Matrix Neo my way out of all of these conversations. I was like, I'm black, but yeah, it's nuanced and it's complex and, like, it's all this stuff. And then George Floyd happened. And that guy was murdered on a public street with a police officer with his knee on his neck. And my heart broke into a million pieces, but I still wasn't quite there. I was like, okay, I've got to do something has to be done. I don't know what needs to be done, but I'm a black guy. I've got to do something, but I don't have the language to articulate what being a black person in America is all about. But I was interested in that. But I was you probably all heard the term Uncle Tom. I don't think I was quite an Uncle Tom, but I was on the Uncle Tom spectrum. I was passive and timid when it came to things such as race or gender equality or sexual choice equality or abortion rights. I was just sort of just neutral-ish. Even though I had opinions, I never expressed them. I was just the guy that was never going to cause waves. And then I watched the eulogy of George Floyd that was done by Reverend Sharpton, and I watched this eulogy, and Reverend Sharpton very adroitly summarized what being a black person in the United States of America is all about. And what it is, quite frankly, is America has had its knee on the neck of black people for 401 years. Your knee's on our neck. Your knee's on our neck. So every accomplishment that any black person ever achieves in America, whether it's Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or Dr. Carver or Dr. King or anyone, is in spite of the fact that America has its knee on the black person's neck. And I watched that, and I watched it like 15 times. And it made me realize that I had squandered decades of opportunity for me to stand up for my people, black people in America. And I will tell you a story, and then I'll end it. So I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and like 10 years ago, I went home when everyone was still alive, and I have an uncle, my favorite uncle, Gerald, and Uncle Gerald goes to juke joints. Like, there's still juke joints in Charleston, believe it or not, like these little hole in the wall, like other folks call them dive bars, but in black culture they're juke joints because there's like live music, but it's not like scheduled. This is a really amazing experience. If you ever get a chance, you should do it. So my uncle takes me to this juke joint in Charleston, and I go in, and my uncle's like royalty in this juke joint, and so he's got his own table. So we sit down at the table, and people are coming up, and he's very proud of his nephew, and he's like, "This is my nephew." And people are like, "Oh my God, you're Blondell's." My mom's name is Blondell. "You're Blondell's son. Oh my God, I'm so and so." And like, I don't remember any of these people. And then this man who's like my age comes up to the table, and he says, "I'm so proud of you, Norm." And or he says, "B. I'm so proud of you, B." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." And he was like, "You don't remember me. My name is X, and we grew up on the project together, but I never got a chance to play with you because your grandmama would always like shoo all of us away, like you were like in a bubble, and like we couldn't talk to you, connect with you in any way. But I remembered you from my childhood, and I remembered you when you went to the Citadel. I remembered the announcement when you were the first African American regimental commander, and I just followed you throughout my life, and I can't tell you how proud I am of you." And then he said to me, "Listen, anywhere in this area of Charleston you go, you tell him that X has your back and you're good. So you can do whatever you want. If you want to drink, if you want women, if you want drugs, whatever you want, just tell him X and you're good." So this guy leaves the table, and I turn to my uncle and I'm like, "Who in the actual F is this dude?" And my uncle's like, "Oh, that guy is like the drug kingpin of Charleston. That's who this guy was. And he grew up with you, and I know his family, and like we're actually maybe related, and like it's weird stuff." And so I was like, "Wow, that's really interesting. This like guy is proud of me, and this is really weird." But then I paused and I thought about this. So here's a guy, here's a kid, a man who has managed to take the drug part out of it just for a second, because everyone goes to the corner because we've been trained to go to the corner. "Oh, drug dealers, like, they're terrible humans." But think about it in terms of free market economics. This guy, this man, through leadership, through entrepreneurial spirit, and quite frankly, through force of will, and being very shrewd, and being very calculating, and sometimes being very mean and maybe evil, had managed to create this empire. And he was rich and he was successful, but in the wrong thing, right? Because that's a bad thing. And so I thought to myself, like, wow, what if this guy had access to the same opportunities that I had access to? He could be a federal judge, or he could be the attorney general, or he could be a senator or congressperson, but he just didn't have access to the same opportunities that a lot of other people take for granted. He has talent. He's just as talented as I am, even probably more so. He's smart, as smart as I am, maybe even more so. Obviously, he didn't have access to undergrad or graduate school or any of that stuff, but he has the raw ability and the raw talent. But your knee was on his neck. Your knee was on his neck, and you forced him to hustle in the streets, and he made his version of lemonade out of lemons. And maybe he's more talented than me. Maybe he could be more successful than me in white society. And so I'll leave you guys with that. The knee of our society in America has been on the necks of black people, and more recently brown people and women and LGBTQ people and people with disabilities. Your knee's on our neck. And just because you're born with a skin color doesn't mean you have ability or entitlement to anything. We all have to go out and earn it. And all we want to do, and I will go out on a limb and I will speak for black people right now, all we want is an opportunity, the same as the kid whose dad was the CEO of XYZ, who gets into Yale or Harvard because he's a legacy, and then like has a red carpet rolled out before him, and then maybe becomes president of the United States. by doing nothing. We want the opportunity to work hard and to be measured on our ability and our merits. But your knee's on our neck, and so we can't. And so when you look at a neighborhood or a section of our country and you see drugs and violence, and you turn your nose up to it and say like, oh, it's just, think about the fact that that's because your knee's on our neck, and enterprising people make a way in the world, whether you agree with their choice or not, because all of us have to live and all of us have to provide for our families and loved ones. And so that's all I wanted to say tonight. I thank Andrew and Eden for this opportunity. And I wish everyone well. And please vote in November. I believe our lives literally depend on it. Thank you all.
And that is Tuesday Funk for August. Thanks again to all our readers, Tracy Harford-Porter, Kyle Thiessen, Erin Watson, Jocelyn Geboy, and Norm Doucet.
Thanks also to all of you for joining us tonight. Just a reminder to donate if you'd like to throw some money at tonight's readers. You can think of it as buying them a beer in the future. Or if you hated everything, you can think of it as donating out of spite. Again, that's Venmo at ME3DIA. Me3dia is how I pronounce it. There's links down in the comments. Thanks again for chatting with us tonight. Have a great night, and hope to see you again on September 1.